Shalom, shalom, Mishpachah. Shabbat shalom. It's the Shabbat day, and we are relaxing right now. So I just wanted to come on here really quick and, talk about the situation that's going on in Israel right now. It's a tragedy, that's happening right now, and more than what people say. It is more dynamic than people will admit to. It's not as simple as just Israel committing genocide on the Gazan people, which is absolutely what's going on. But there's a multifaceted understanding of the events that are happening here. What we have to recognize is that this is a war that is being waged in the media too, right? And so there's a war of propaganda on both sides, and the Gazans are winning that war because clearly Israel is dropping bombs on them, right? All the Gazans would have to do to win the so-called media war is go outside and show what they're experiencing, right? That's all they have to do. And so the media war, the propaganda war, as they're calling it, is, of course, not the real war because there are bodies that are on the ground dead, right? That's the real war. And the people who are dead, do you see what I'm saying, are talking to you by them being dead. And in Gaza right now, they're counting 12,000 or more casualties, right? 12,000 people dead, and half of those people being children. That's an incredible number of people that are dead. There's more people than I've met in my whole life that are dead in this war, right? And so it's a hard thing to just stomach that's happening every day. And then the other thing that's going on is the Israeli government is showing no sympathy. They are not distinguishing between civilians and Palestinians. They are killing children and saying that it's justified because there might be a terrorist there. Do you see what I'm saying? We've seen so many dead children and not a single dead Hamas terrorist, right? People are saying, does Hamas even exist? Do they even really exist? You know what I mean? So anyway, there's another problem. There's another problem, right? The fact that Hamas or whatever has a social media presence and well-orchestrated social media strategies is troubling, right? It's very troubling because we've seen also Greta Thunberg, who is a famous Illuminati propagandist, right? Not even an adult, like 15, 16-year-old kid. She's an Illuminati propagandist and will go around showing up at these Illuminati-sponsored events, right? These Illuminati events, right? And what she'll do is she'll promote the narrative, right? She'll promote the narrative. And so the Gazans being victims is somehow a part of the narrative. It's built into the storyline that we're seeing right now, right? And don't think that we're saying that this is all contrived, like the people aren't really dead or anything like that, because there's some Israeli propaganda that's coming out saying that they're faking injuries, right? And if you've dropped thousands of bombs on people, you don't have to fake injuries. So we know that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. I'll mess it up this morning. We know that's not what's happening. But what is happening is a movement behind these 12,000 casualties of the ethnic cleansing that's going on in Israel right now. There are 12,000 casualties so far, right? And so what we need to pay close attention to is the apparatus that is using those 12,000 casualties, those 12,000 victims of genocide, as propaganda for something else. Do you understand what I mean? Right? Israel is using Hamas to justify the taking of the Gaza Strip and more than likely the West Bank too. Israel is using Hamas. Hamas is in Gaza. I know they're not in the West Bank, but because of Hamas, they'll have more reason to enter in the West Bank, and they're doing that already, right? There's been 200 people killed in the West Bank, you know, because of this war, and they don't really have a whole lot, you know, governmentally to do with one another, because the West Bank isn't a Hamas, you know, the Hamas is not in the West Bank in the same way that they are in the Gaza Strip. Apparently they control, quote unquote, control the Gaza Strip, and it's not the same thing in the West Bank, right? But these victims, to not lose focus here, these victims of the genocide that's taking place in Gaza are also being used, right? Hamas terrorists are being used as an excuse to conduct an ethnic cleansing of Gaza. But the people who have been genocided, the people who have been ethnically cleansed, those 12,000 people who have now died, are also being used in order to push something else, right? Is it, you know, Muslim control, right? Is it Muslim control? Is that what's being pushed? Because there are well-crafted, inorganic media posts that I've seen, ones that are well-crafted and inorganic, which means they've come from a studio somewhere, not a studio that needs to, you know, present to you fake bodies, because there's real bodies, but a studio nevertheless that's taking advantage of the real bodies. Do you see what I'm saying? You've got a very weird situation in the Muslim world right now, where the leaders of the entire Muslim world, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, you know, the richest people in the Muslim world that represent the entire Muslim world, right? Save Iran. And was Iran there? I don't know. I have to look it up. But the leaders of the Muslim world came together just recently and announced that they would like to see a ceasefire, but no economic, no military, no anything except for rhetoric against Israel, which is the same thing that the United States is doing, right? And if Joe Biden gets called a war criminal by continuing relations with Israel, then what about the Arab leadership? What about the Muslim leadership? Why are they not sanctioning Israel, right? Why are they still funding and fueling and normalizing relationships with Israel if they have now 12,000 members of their religion who have done ostensibly nothing wrong, but lived in the same place as this other people who don't want them there? Why in the world can you normalize relations with that group of people? Do you see what I'm saying? If, let's just say you are part of an extended group or extended family, right? Let's just say, I'm trying to think of a good analogy here, and there's no real clear-cut analogy that, you know, can be used that will make, you know, one-for-one sense. But let's just say that you are a part of a, and I don't want to use a fraternity either, because we know the fraternities are the bad guys. But so a good example for the situation that we're seeing, and you can tell I'm stalling here to try to get the example. And I guess the best example would be to say that if you were a member, let's just use another religion, because we think of, Muslims, we think of Muslims really from the outside looking in. We don't know how they feel about each other and the different groups or all that, but we know how Christians feel about one another. Let's just say that you have a group of Catholics, right? Catholic people who control a large and vast organization that has resources, that has funding, that has input into governments, that is able to make political changes and has the political power to control economically countries and municipalities, right? Let's just say you have what we have in the Catholic Church. And so let's just say you have in a place that is non-Catholic, right? Let's just say you have in a Muslim country. Let's just say you have in the leader of the Muslim countries in Saudi Arabia, right? That you have a small portion of Saudi Arabia that's Catholic, right? And where there's 1 million Catholics that live there. And let's just even up the ante, because Catholicism is a white religion, right? Or European religion. And, Muslims, Islam is an Arabic religion. Let's just say in Saudi Arabia, there's 1 million white folks there. There's 1 million Europeans that live in this area, right? And then let's just say that there was something that happened and Saudi Arabia begins to bomb and kill 12,000 white Christian Catholics on TV, saying things like, we're going to wipe the animals out, all of them. That any person that's from this Christian town, this Christian city, this Christian nation that's on the corner of Saudi Arabia is an animal, is a terrorist, right? They are Catholic terrorists, and we want to exterminate them all because of their support, right? Wouldn't the Pope have something to say about that? Let's just say Israel has normalized relationships with the Pope. Let's just say the Pope gives Israel money and Israel gives the Pope money. Let's just say they're already in business deals that are worth billions of dollars. Let's just say if the Pope wanted to cripple this Saudi Arabia, this Muslim empire, it could economically. Let's just say that the Pope had that power, right? Wouldn't the Pope leverage that power in order to free his people, from his Catholic people, from that enclave in Saudi Arabia? If that Catholic nation of 1 million people in Saudi Arabia begins to get bombed and destroyed, and its people ethnically cleansed out of Saudi Arabia, wouldn't the Pope have more to say than, hey, I think you should stop? Wouldn't the Pope stop his relationship, or shouldn't the Pope stop his relationship with that nation, right? And so what you've seen, to go back to the actual real world events, is the Muslim Pope, right? The leader of the Muslim world, the national leaders of the nations that lead the Muslim world, and there's different ones. There was Prince Salman, right? And then there's a couple of other different people whose names I'm not familiar with, but whose nations that they represent, whose religion that they represent, we're all familiar with. None of them, and then these are oil billionaires who control the oil, the fuel in the region that Israel is situated in. If the Muslim world decided to cut Israel's supply off, the war would not continue. There would be no ethnic cleansing. Do you understand what I mean? That means the people in the Muslim world, the people who are leading and funding and the voice and the face, the image of the Muslim world, the most powerful people in Islam, want the Gazans dead. And I didn't say don't mind or value their political relationship more than the Gazans. No, I didn't say that at all. What I'm saying is They want them dead. That's the reality of the situation. That's what you have to look at when you think about what's going on, right? They want them dead. They're calling for the ceasefire, but that is the absolute least that they could do, and is actually nothing, right? It's the same stance that America is taking, while at the same time arming and funding them, right? It's the exact same stance. The Muslim world has said ceasefire, while at the same time providing Israel fuel, right? It's the same relationship. The Muslim world, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, has the same relationship with Israel that America does. Do you see what I mean? Do you see how it's the feet and toes of iron and Mary clay, right? Daniel 2. Do you see how that's the sometimes separate, sometimes together world power? That's what's going on here. That's what you're seeing. Because the Muslim world could cripple this war. If they stop sending fuel to Israel, stop sending fuel to the UK, stop sending fuel to the, paying for fuel, and stop funding these different Western worlds, these different Western powers, war would be over. Wouldn't be no genocide, right? Wouldn't be one. They could at any time control the war. But instead, they are in the public face saying ceasefire, but in the private face, an ally. Do you see what I mean? And so when we go back to the propaganda war, let's switch back and talk about the propaganda war. It's the Muslim nations who are using, and this is why we know that these Muslim nations want the Gazans dead too, because it has to be these Muslim nations, these outside Muslim nations, that are funding the propaganda war. How can you fund the propaganda war and consciously affect what young people believe? Because it's young people, not churchgoers, because churchgoers are confused and standing for Israel, right? So who is driving the TikTok Palestine propaganda war, right? Who's driving that? Why do we see these well-manicured videos coming out of Palestine when they're just suffering for food and water, right? When they're suffering for power and internet? How are these, social media campaigns being waged unless that there's a mighty political force with money and influence behind that too? Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see how that must be being funded with Greta Thunberg representing Palestine, right? How is that the case? How is the money coming in for the Palestine resistance propaganda campaign, right? If the money can be spent on the propaganda, it can also be taken from the people that are waging the war against the Palestinians. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's an underplay going on. There's a unspoken nuance. There's a dynamism beneath the surface that's going on here, right? And the Gazans are being used as pawns both ways, right? They are the ones that are having to die so that this political war or this religious war can have real blood to fuel it, right? Because in the future, you may see this Christian, not Christian, but yeah, Christian Jew versus Islam war again. And the Gazans may be the fuel behind it. Do you see what I'm saying? We've known for a long time about the plan for 3 world wars that was come up with supposedly by the Ku Klux Klanmen in the 1800s. Albert Pike. You guys familiar with Albert Pike, who was a 33rd degree Freemason and a Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan? Do you see what I'm saying? And a Satanist, and a member of the Illuminati, right? So what do those four things have in common? They're all the same thing, right? They're all the same organization, right? And he put out this, I'm looking at the way I'm looking right now. I don't ever look at myself before I come on, really. And so he came up with this plan for 3 world wars. And the last world war is a war, like a multifaceted war, originally between the Christians and the Muslims, and then between the religious believers and the nihilists, right? The people that don't believe in anything. Do you see what I'm saying? And then after that war, the wars that are coming from this last Third World War, that they would be so bad and so public and so bloody that the people would beg for a solution, beg for a leader, a world leader. And that world leader would be the anti-Messiah. And that anti-Messiah would instill Luciferian religion for the world. Do you understand that that plan is coming to play? That you're actually living out a planned end times prophetic situation right now? That's what this is. You have to realize that right now you've got people dying in real time with a ticker, right? Like it's a sports game. People being bombed and killed in real time that you're watching with a scoreboard. Do you understand? Do you understand that this is what the last days look like? This is what they feel like. The energy has been turned up. Do you see what I'm saying? The plan to start the 3 world wars started 100 years ago. And it's come to pass, right? Do you see what I mean? How the prophecy for these events taking place was given 2,000 years ago in the book of Revelation, right? And then 2,500 years ago in the book of Daniel. But the timeline, the near timeline, is coming to play quick, fast, and in a hurry, right? You are, the Messiah says, blessed are the women who didn't give children in those days. Why? Because they wouldn't have to see their children die. It's a curse to see your child die, right? Because woe is coming on, right? In the time when in Jerusalem, when the city fell, when the nation fell in 70 AD, 30 years before that, Messiah was saying, woe to the people of this generation, because woe is coming upon you, right? Right? Woe to the people of this generation, because you're getting ready to see worldwide genocide on TV. Woe is coming, because you're seeing the Gazans being given up by the Muslim world, being sacrificed as a human sacrifice to fuel something else that we don't know is coming yet. That's the point behind all this. The Muslim world has given them up as a sacrifice, killing them themselves by fueling Israel. No matter what the rhetoric says, the action is nothing. No sanctions from people who are also funding the Gazan propaganda, using the dead people in Gaza to fund something else. You're living in a really, really dangerous world right now. And you can tell it's the end of the world. You can tell it's the end times. Why? Because they're fighting in Israel in the name of Israel. We know that they're not the real Israelite people that we are, right? We know that. So, you guys, that's really all I had to say. Been looking at all of this going on and, trying to analyze the events. And this is the solution, that it is a fomented war with a sacrificial lamb being used to drive it. Real blood used to drive a fake war. All right, you guys? Sorry, I'm talking like Punisher or somebody. But it's just emotional to me because it's just really, 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 really real, right? Okay, all right. I'm talking like Wolverine out here. Shalom, shalom, you guys.